Take the Leap is the podcast where we get real about the roller coaster that is entrepreneurship and life. Sure, some folks make running a business look like a walk in the park, but let's be honest, it's more like a wild ride through a theme park with a lot of unexpected twists and turns.
Join us, your co-hosts, Ashlan
and Tory,
as we spill the beans on our own real-life experiences and shine a spotlight on some amazing guests. From the highs of success stories to the lows of epic failures. And hey, we'll even throw in some cringe-worthy, laugh-out-loud, embarrassing moments for good measure.
So buckle up and tune in every Tuesday and Thursday for a dose of raw, unfiltered truth about what it's really like to chase your dreams and build a business.
Whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur or just dipping your toes into the startup world, we've got something for everyone. Even if it's just to make you think, wow, I'm glad I didn't do what they did.
Hello and welcome back to Take the Leap. We are so excited to have our guest today. Jana Burkholder is the owner and founder of Jana Burkholder Coaching. She is a certified health and life coach as well as a personal trainer and has been helping women transform their health for 15 years. In her one-on-one coaching program, she helps women break free from toxic diet culture and create healthy relationships with food and body so they can be present in life and live with more freedom, peace, and ease. Thank you so much for being here. We're so happy to have you on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, welcome. Well, we like to kick off all of our episodes pretty much with the same question, which is, what is your Take the Leap story? And by that, we mean, what made you want to take the leap and jump into your own business and jump into the world of entrepreneurship? So yeah, why don't you tell us your story?
Okay, great. I feel like there's a couple of reasons that I decided to take the leap. One of them was that I had dated a guy in the past that had his own business and had this like time and travel freedom, which I just thought was so fun and so cool. And at the time I was working a pretty busy like corporate gym job that I didn't feel like I could leave very often. And I was working so many hours. So one of the appeals was just being able to have time freedom and location freedom. But it was also really about being able to do what I wanted and being able to help people in the way that I wanted. And I was a personal trainer for a long time and was struggling for a long time with my own body image and being just like really feeling a lot of pressure to look a certain way. And that translated into me being very obsessive about food and about exercise. And I knew all of the exercise science and was seeing that it wasn't working for me and it wasn't working for especially my female clients the way that it should work. Right. The math wasn't mathing, right? Like the things that should be like translating to success in terms of weight loss or whatever wasn't working the way that the science was saying that it should, or the way that I was taught. And so I was seeking like something different. And when I started looking into health coaching, started learning more about it, started a program to learn how to be a coach, a certification program. And then in that process, I was getting coached as well. And I experienced so much transformation in my own life, in my own way of experiencing my body and understanding my relationship with my body and with food. It changed so much for me that I was like, yes, this is the way that I want to help people now. And I couldn't do it in that same capacity, still working in the position that I was in. So I just experienced so much freedom in my own life from that transformation that I experienced through the mindset shifts that I had through coaching. And I knew that I wanted to bring that to as many women as possible. And so that was, a huge motivator for me to start my own business.
That's incredible. And I love what you said about how the way you were trained and the way kind of like you were educated, those things weren't working for women and there just wasn't that formula that you had learned just wasn't working. And so you decided to figure out why and create a system of your own because of that. And I just feel like a lot of people end up in entrepreneurship for very similar reasons of this wasn't working for them or this environment didn't suit them. It wasn't built for us. So therefore we have to go and build our own kind of a thing, which I think is really powerful because it's just a really cool way to make that change and live your life the way you want. So thank you for sharing that. That's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thanks so much for sharing that, Jana. What piece of advice would you give yourself when you started your business, knowing what you know now?
I think one piece of advice that I would give myself at the beginning is that you have to keep trying things. And I think when you first start a business, it feels overwhelming. There's so many things to figure out. And I started marketing on social media, which wasn't my original plan, but it was 2020 when I started my business. And so that was like the pivot. It was like, okay, well, social media is the option right now, really. And so I struggled to learn that. And I felt like things were always changing too fast. And now I feel like the change is okay. Like, just keep trying things, and eventually something will land. You will figure out a pattern that works, and you can like learn how to evolve and kind of roll with it as things change. So I think that would be something that would have been helpful for me at the beginning, is like, just know that you just need to keep trying things. You're not going to be perfect at anything at the beginning, and that's okay. It's okay to like try things and have them not work, and you just have to keep trying again until you find something that works for you.
I love that. I feel like that learning journey is one of the most important and crucial pieces of entrepreneurship. Like, we just don't, know day one, like, that everything that we're doing is going to work. And that is part of the reason that we really love doing this podcast, is to like teach people that, it's a different experience for everybody. And what's going to resonate for you and with your audience is not necessarily what's going to resonate, with Tori's audience or my audience. It's all going to be a little bit different, and it's okay to have kind of not the same, cookie cutter way of doing things. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, everybody has their own journey and everybody learns differently. And so the things that you go through in the beginning of entrepreneurship and the things that happen to you along that path and what your business was 3 years ago and what it is today is probably completely different. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's pretty normal, pretty common for people to have those shifts because we learn as we go. I mean, that's life, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think at least for me, there's a fear of like not getting it right the first time with like naming my program or my brand colors or the things that I posted on social media. And, now in hindsight, looking back, it's like, well, it's okay because you can change that stuff. It's never permanent. And yeah, I look back on my first like TikTok videos and they're cringy, but that's okay because we all start there, and just because things are cringy or feel cringy doesn't mean you can't still help someone with it,
Exactly. Oh, I love that. I love that so much. I think that's it's such a good thing to remember, and I feel like I wish we could just share that with every new entrepreneur. Like your first posts are going to be cringy, and that's okay. But you have to start somewhere. Like, cringy is okay. Don't be afraid to be cringy.
Right. Yeah. We all start there.
We all start there. It's so true.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to ask you one more big question before we get into like our round of hot seat questions.
Okay.
And that is, what is your why? Why do you do what you do?
My why is being able to help as many women as I can experience the freedom that I have found, because I think I struggled for such a long time with not feeling like I was good enough because of, the way I felt in my body. Regardless of what it actually looks like, we have our own image of like what is okay and not okay. And I think that regardless of size, most women deal with that at least at some point in their life. And so I really struggled with that, and it translated to unhealthy patterns with food and unhealthy patterns with exercise, which I thought were healthy. And like on the outside, everybody else thought were healthy. But internally, it was just a constant battle. I was constantly thinking about food. I was constantly beating myself up for not doing enough, for not like, eating clean enough, or for not working out long enough, or whatever it may be. And in reality, I wasn't treating my body right. I wasn't taking care of myself the way that I needed to be. And I see that happening so much for so many women. And I just feel like we as women have so much good to do and to share in the world that we don't need to be bogged down by thinking about like calories or,
Right.
how my stomach looks in these jeans or whatever. Like, we don't need to have that be our primary thought throughout the whole day, because we've got much bigger stuff to do. Like we've got
Yeah.
goals and dreams to achieve. And so I just want to be able to help other women to be able to experience that same freedom, because it's so different, like what's going on in my brain now versus what it used to be like. And it's so freeing. And so, yeah, I just want more people to be able to have that same experience.
That's so incredible. Thank you for saying that and for sharing that. I feel like, yeah, I don't know one person who hasn't dealt with that to some degree in their life, but I think you're right. I feel like, especially women, all this pressure is put on us, and we have so much to give, and especially women entrepreneurs who want to give back and help their communities. And why are we so worried about all this extra stuff? And it would be really nice, but it's not like people don't talk about women's bodies and how they're different from men, and how there are different tactics and techniques to make your body healthier. And as someone who has PCOS and has gone through that with doctors off and on for my whole life, basically, it's so frustrating. And everyone's like, well, just lose weight and you'll be fine.
Right.
Yeah.
That's always the
And
answer.
it's not, it's like, okay, sure. Yeah. That would be great, but that's not the answer to everything. And so it's like, when you have somebody in your corner, a health coach, a provider, whoever, telling you, okay, we're going to focus on different things and make sure that you're healthy and that you can contribute to your life. That's so encouraging that people are starting to do that now, because it's just the whole medical industry is so frustrating sometimes,
Yeah,
especially when it comes
it's
to that.
so backwards.
Yeah.
Like, weight gain is a symptom. It's your
Mhm.
body trying to protect itself from something. And a lot of times the medical community treats it as if it is the underlying problem. And most of the time it's not. Most of the time it's a red flag that there is another problem underlying. And so we're missing all of that completely. And yeah, focusing on the wrong thing. And when you're just like so focused on losing weight, because that's what everybody says, whether it's for health or for just this beauty standard that most people can't attain, it just puts so much extra stress and pressure on our body and ends up working against that whole goal. So, yeah,
Agreed. Oh, that's so
something
great.
I'm really passionate about.
I love it. I think that's really awesome. That's really cool. So, well, we are now ready for our hot seat questions. My first question that I love to ask is, what is the best and or worst advice you've ever received in your career?
Oh, I think the best advice that I've received is similar to what I just shared, is like, don't be afraid to be bad at first.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Everybody should remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Put it on a sticky note. Don't be
Yeah.
afraid to
We're
be
all beginners at first.
cringy. I love that.
Well, I have our next question. So, on your website, you talk about how stress caused you to gain weight alongside a slew of other negative symptoms. I'm just curious, like, how long did it take for you to realize that? And what advice would you have for women to help kind of remove some of that stress that could be causing that from their lives?
It took me a long time to realize it, honestly. I mean, like I said, I was training for a lot of years. And the thing that kind of was the aha moment for me about that, there's a lot of research on it now too, showing this, but the thing that landed for me finally was that I started meditating daily. And it wasn't anything like super fancy. It was before I had done any meditation trainings. I just started doing like 5 or 10 minutes a day. And my body started changing, and I wasn't intending for it to. It just was. And I was still doing the same like hardcore clean eating. And I was working out with a trainer at the gym that I worked at. But I had been doing all of those things all along. So none of that changed. And the thing that like triggered for me was everybody was like, oh my gosh, you're leaning out. What's happening? And I knew that I hadn't changed anything. I was still doing the same workouts, and I was still doing the same like eating. And that's what everybody always thinks about first. They always think about food and exercise. Those are the only two factors that we usually consider when we think about body composition. Um, and that's only like a small part of it. So everyone was starting to comment on my body, which that's a whole other conversation. But I was like, I had to kind of think about what have I changed in my life? Like what is different? And I finally realized it's like I'm taking care of my mental health. I'm meditating every day. I'm feeling more calm and more centered, and work isn't as stressful for me because I'm doing this practice. And so that was kind of like my aha moment. And it took years to figure that out, like a lot of years. um, and then what was the second part of your question? Oh, helping other women be able to figure that out for themselves. I think that simple things like that are really powerful. Breathing exercises, which there are a million different versions of that you can do, are really quick ways to change the state of your nervous system. And when we can incorporate something like that multiple times throughout the day, even just for a few seconds, it can really start changing the way that our nervous system is responding to things and getting us into a calmer state. Because I think for the most part, we're living in that constant stress state most of the time. Most of us are. So it's really helpful if you can, learn a practice like meditation or do some deep breathing exercises just to start to get your nervous system to calm down. But then, there's lots of other things that you can start learning to incorporate just by asking yourself, what is something that makes me feel calm or gives me pleasure or makes me feel relaxed, and then starting to prioritize doing those things, because for a lot of women all of that stuff gets shoved to the back burner and everybody else's needs come first. So I think it's just really important to kind of go back to like what really feeds me and make sure that those things become a priority, because we can't really love and take care of everybody else very well when we're, running on empty all the time. So I think just prioritizing some of those things that are life-giving is helpful.
Yeah, it's like they say, right? Put on your mask first before you do that on to anybody else on the plane. Like you've got to be able to take care of yourself before you are trying to do that for others. And yeah, I think folks or you had said it earlier about, weight gain is a symptom of other things going on. I know that like cortisol and stress hormones, and when you're in the constant fight or flight mode, like your body is going to just want all those, those resources of what you're eating to store up energy to fight whatever fight it is that it's, that is technically not happening. It's you battling your brain essentially. And so yeah, I think a lot of folks don't realize that that is something that they're going through. So that is great. Just, breathing, meditating, great practices to incorporate.
Yeah. And we can get stuck in that. Sometimes there is a very real like trauma or stressor that happens. And then our body can get stuck in a constant fight or flight loop. And then it's like using all of its energy to fight instead of, revving up your metabolism. So, and that's happening for so many people. Or we also have so much like toxic burden from our environment that your body uses fat to protect you from, because a lot of times we cannot detox it out fast enough. And so your body will use fat cells as like a shield around the little toxins to keep you safe from them because it couldn't get rid of it fast enough. So there's basically, I mean, I think that's a great reframe that I always teach my clients is fat is there to protect you.
Yeah.
So your body is perceiving some kind of threat, or there is a real threat, and it's using that as a way to take care of you. And so it's more about figuring out what the actual need is, you know? And I think that mindset shift can also be really helpful in reducing the stress, because when you're constantly thinking that there's something wrong with you, that like, why can't I lose weight? And you're just focusing on losing weight and you're trying to force your body to do something that it doesn't want to do. That's just creating more and more stress, you know?
That makes sense. It's also kind of amazing that our bodies can do that. They're like, oh, you need protection. So therefore I'm just going to do it. Like, that's kind of incredible that our bodies just do that without us having to tell it to do that. Right.
Right.
So if we could just get it to not do that in certain circumstances, though, that would be great.
Or I think even learning to appreciate that that's what's happening.
Yeah.
That like, okay, my body is fighting for me. And a lot of times I think we perceive that we're fighting against our body, when really like our body is defending us and fighting the external world for us. And, you know, sometimes it's just figuring out, okay, what resources does my body need that it doesn't have right now that I can provide for it, instead of trying to fight against it, you know?
Right. I love that. That's really cool. It's really sweet when you think about it. Your body's looking after you.
Yeah, I
like
think
that.
so.
I like that. Well, kind of on a similar note, so as somebody who's also, we've all grown up in the toxic diet culture, so we all kind of understand it to some degree. What would you tell someone who's just kind of diving into that and saying, okay, I want a better relationship with food? Like, what would you tell them as like first steps of what they should start doing to kind of reframe?
I think one of the most important things is learning that your body is the best like health expert that you could ever have. And we have been taught by diet culture to ignore our body signals and not trust our body. And I think that's where a lot of people are now. So they feel like they have to follow some plan. They have to like have someone tell them like, this is how many calories you should be eating, or this is what your macro balance should be, or whatever. And we bypass all of the innate wisdom that our body has. So just learning to recognize that your body actually knows best. And sometimes it takes a little bit of work to learn those signals and to like reconnect with that messaging that your body is giving you. But once you do, you don't need any other plan to follow, because if you've tapped into your own body's signals, you can figure out how much you should be eating, or when you should be eating, or what foods are better for you than others. And you don't need, you know, any diet plan or, you know, system to follow.
That's really cool. I love that.
Yeah. That's really freeing too.
Yeah.
Not having to rely on something else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's all built in.
Yeah, it was a couple, oh God, it would have been more than 10 years ago. I remember reading this book about like intuitive eating, and just, you know, like sometimes, well, I mean, if you think about like corporate work and jobs, you know, sometimes you have like such a short amount of time to eat, or like, I know that for me personally, even though I like work from home and I'm, you know, at this desk a lot, I always try to, I get away from the desk to like eat food, you know what I mean? Just so that you can like actually listen to your body and your stomach about like how much is enough and when you should stop and things like that, and not feeling afraid to be like, okay, made a little bit too much, cover it up, put it in the fridge. You can always go back to it later. So do you have any tips or tricks around that kind of thing with folks to like give themselves enough space and time to eat, and like not try to like be like, okay, I've got 10 minutes before I'm eating, I'm going to just shove a bunch of food in my face and hope that was good kind of thing?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really big thing, is who you're being when you're eating is more important than what you're actually eating. So if we're always eating while we're multitasking, so many people are just eating and shoving food in while they're still trying to work and they don't ever leave their desk. It's great that you leave your desk. But being able to make eating the main event while you're doing it is one really important way for your body to actually be able to fully digest your food and extract nutrients from it and all of the things that your body needs to do in order to make that meal worthwhile. So yes, I teach my clients to eat, not doing other things, not multitasking, not eating while you're driving. Obviously, there are going to be some circumstances where that's the only option, but prioritizing it as much as you can. And really, like, it doesn't need to be super long. 20 minutes is a good amount of time to aim for a meal. And then the other thing is, like, take some breaths, going back to the breath. So taking a few breaths before you start eating a meal can be really good at getting you out of that stress state, and then like realizing what you're doing and then allowing your body to kind of like tap in, like, okay, we're eating, it's time to start digesting. And then just involving the rest of our senses, like paying attention to your food, looking at it before you put it in your body and smelling it, and just being aware of the environment around you can be really good at helping to just kind of slow us down so that our body can switch into that, okay, it's time to digest functioning.
That's so smart. That's such a good way to do it. I know. I feel like my husband and I are both guilty of this. We just like inhale our food as soon as it's in front of us. And granted, we have a toddler that's trying to grab our food or, whatever. But still, it's like I feel like I've always been that way, where the food's in front of me. I better eat it right now. Like it's going to disappear if I don't or something.
Yeah.
I don't know why I do that.
I think that happens to like a lot of people. I feel like I started eating fast in college because my schedule was so jammed that I just didn't leave enough time to actually eat. And I think that's kind of just our fast pace of our culture just kind of starts requiring that we don't have proper meal times.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the problems, right? Is just like our bodies are just being treated like a trap door to shove food into, and that's not how it's supposed to work. One of the things that I do with my clients, especially if they have like kids or a partner at home, is doing a little chewing contest. So ideally, we're supposed to chew about 20 times before we swallow, and pretty much nobody does that. The average is more like 3 to 5 chews before we swallow a bite of food. So I just tell my clients to, whatever they're eating with, to do a little contest and see like who can chew the longest. And it kind of turns it into a game, but it also brings a lot of awareness. And, if you're chewing your food, it's naturally going to slow your eating down too. So that's can be helpful.
Really good idea. Yeah. I am also very anxious about my child choking. So that's actually a really good idea, so that even if it just helps calm my fears of, I feel like when we're eating with him, I'm always like, okay, now chew. And then I'm like showing
and then you're not.
Yeah, exactly. And then I'm doing the exact opposite of what I'm telling him to do.
Yeah.
So, that's so funny.
I think we're all a little guilty of that.
Yeah. I also know that I always try to drink like a lot of water while I'm eating too, so that like it gets washed down with the food.
Smart.
So one interesting fact is that our stomach acid can be diluted by a lot of liquid when we're eating. So it actually can work against your digestion to have a bunch of fluids with your meal. So it's usually better to kind of drink your beverages a little bit more before or after, because then your stomach acid isn't getting diluted. And that stomach acid is often, for most Americans, it's already kind of on the low side. And so then we're like not getting that full digestion happening in the stomach. So it's actually better to not have big beverages at meals.
I'm going to test that out.
That is really interesting. Yeah. Would you recommend drinking before a meal or after? Like, what do you think would have, or do you think it matters?
I mean, I think it's good to be kind of consistently drinking throughout the day. So if it was going to be like a bigger drink, I would say it would probably be better after than before, just so that you give your body enough chance, like with the stomach acid in contact with the food, to really like break stuff down at that level that it needs to.
Interesting.
I like that.
It's so
I'm gonna
fascinating.
give that a shot.
Yeah, I was gonna be like, I'm learning
there's
so
so
much.
I know. I know. Well, kind of along these same lines, I have a question. And as you know, I just talked about how I'm a parent. And one of the main things, because my husband and I both have grown up with an unhealthy relationship with food, that showed up a lot in our lives, both in childhood and adulthood. So as parents, we're obviously trying to be better, right, for our kid. And not only do we want to give that good example, but we really want him to hopefully grow up not having those same struggles. And so, what advice would you give to parents who want to teach their kids from the start how to have a healthy relationship with food? What types of things would you encourage them to do?
Mhm. Yeah, I think one really big thing for kids, but also for ourselves, is the language that we use. So, like, because of diet culture, I think most of us kind of have these lists in our heads of like, these foods are good, these foods are bad. And even like, I don't have my own kids, but I have a niece, and I have to think about the way that I talk about food around her, even though I feel like I have a pretty good relationship with food now. But the food is neutral, it's not good or bad. So, we've had all these like, eat this, not that things like for so long, that it's really easy to kind of demonize certain things and then like praise other things. But I think that that language of good foods and bad foods, or thinking about them in that way, is what can start to translate to people as I'm good or I'm bad because of whatever food I just ate. Um, so I think that one of the things is just the language that we use. Like, how do we talk about food? And that's really important for our own brains, but it's also what our kids are picking up too. So how we talk about it. And then what we were saying earlier is like talking about how we talk about bodies or don't talk about bodies, right? And so a lot of my clients, grew up in a different era than these kids are, right? But people are still talking about bodies. I mean, there's this whole thing going on right now about like, is Taylor, people are talking about Taylor Swift, like, is she pregnant? And I think I just saw one today about Lady Gaga, and it's like, we still have this obsession about like seeing bodies and then making comments about them. And moving away from that is really helpful, because that's why kids are wanting to start diets so soon, or being so worried about their body image. And I think that's where a lot of dieting starts, is just being worried that, my body is not okay, so I need to change the way that I'm eating. So I think both of them are really important. Just the way that we talk about not just their bodies, but like your own body or other people's bodies is really important. And just being mindful of, the language that we're using.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because that's something that still really bothers me today. And like growing up, I had fluctuated on my weight throughout my entire life, which I'm sure most people do, but I've had some pretty drastic ones. And then I was pregnant, and I feel like that was also like another thing that like gave people permission almost to start commenting on my body. And then I wasn't pregnant anymore, and they were like, oh, look at you, you look, and it's like, my body is shifting as my life is shifting. And I don't understand why you have to make a comment about it. Like, it doesn't matter if it's well intended or not, whether it's, oh, you look good, or oh, you don't look so good. Like, it makes me uncomfortable regardless of when and what size that's at. So how, like, yeah, I don't know if people just don't know what to say, or they want to give you a compliment, but they don't quite know how. But then I know that I've been guilty of that too, because of the culture we grew up in. So yeah, that's a really good point. I'm really glad you said that and brought that up, because if I'm in the living room with my son and I'm looking at a picture of someone, say, oh, she looks like she might be pregnant, which I would never do. But, like, if I say that, he might think, oh, so it's bad to have a stomach. Like, yeah. So thank you for bringing that up. That's really important.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's so hard with kids too, because it's like they need food to grow and like live and sustain, like they're growing. And I think, especially in like the middle school to teenage years, I mean, I've seen people, sprout a good like 3 to 4 feet in the span of like a year or two. And so food is so important in the process of us, growing up as humans. So yeah, the fact that there's so much diet culture, and I think celebrity culture also does it for us too, of like, oh, look at how, look at how she looks. And I'm like, she makes millions of dollars and, probably gets meals prepared for them.
And the photo is still edited.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. All of that, put color in and change all of those things. But yeah, I think especially more kids, like younger folks nowadays, like not even recognizing that so much of what we see is an edited reality, and that not is not necessarily something to aspire to as well. And I know, like, for myself
Mm-hmm.
personally, like, I have done that where I've like done the gym thing a ton and like, yo-yoed weight up and down. And now as I'm older, I'm like, you know what? I just want to be able to like walk and move and hike when I feel like it, and like lift something when when I need to, and not make it so much focused on weight, but more on like how you feel as a person. And, do you feel comfortable doing the things that you want to do? And it's really helped me lose a ton of weight. Instead of focusing on that, it's just like, okay, let's go make sure that we go on 3 to 4 walks a day with our dog. We usually walk like 10 to 15 minutes, and things like that. And it's just really helped to lessen the burden of thinking that you need to fit some sort of mold for society.
Right. Yeah, and you've taken like the punishment out of it and just are doing it because it's what your body wants and needs to feel good.
Right.
Which is a totally different come from. It makes a difference.
Right. Well, and it's kind of bringing it back to what you said when we started this podcast. People, we're busy. We have stuff we want to do. Why are we worried about all these other things? Why should we let that hold us back? Our bodies are here to help us. They're here to give us the strength and abilities to make things happen and to do the things that we want to do. So yeah, it's just such a good reminder. And thank you for sharing all of that with us. Because yeah, I know I learned a lot from this conversation. I'm hoping our audience will feel the same.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, before we wrap up, is there anything that you would like to tell our audience? How do they find you? I know we talked about a potential quiz that you have as well. So feel free to just plug and shout out your brand.
Okay, awesome. Well, yeah, I did just create a fun new quiz that is figuring out if you're obsessed with food. What is your relationship with food like? And then when you take the quiz, based on your results, I will send you emails afterwards of like, what are some things that you can start doing if this is, if your relationship with food is damaged or if it's healthy. So that's fun. And my social media is Jana_Burkholder on all of the things. Mostly going to be on Instagram. I kind of took a break, but I'm getting back in there. But I'm also on TikTok and Facebook and basically all of them, but Instagram is my main one. So the quiz is linked there in my bio on everything, or it'll pop up if you go to my website, which is janaburkholder.com. And that's all the things.
Awesome. I'm definitely going to be taking that quiz after this, so I'm excited.
Great. It was fun to make, so.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. We had such a great conversation, and I hope our listeners follow you as well and check out your quiz. And everybody, thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Take the Leap podcast. We hope you found useful takeaways you can apply to your entrepreneurial journey. Subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, and keep in touch and follow us on Instagram. If you have business questions, shoot us a direct message or leave us a comment. We'll try to cover it in an upcoming episode. And visit our website, taketheleap-today.com, for more resources like our online course that accompanies this podcast.